So welcome back, students of ancient history. And last time we had left off with the revolutions of well, there really weren't super revolutions, but they were the reforms, the attempted reforms of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, and we saw how their tribuneships had transformed the Roman political system, and it had forever altered how the Romans had done business. And today we are going to begin looking at this period of the Roman Revolution, as it is often called, where there is this radical transformation of how the Romans do things, period. That Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus alter things, but this is really the stones that begin the avalanche that transform the Roman political system and political theory in general. And we'll see a gradual evolution through three stages, really, and that is political disobedience. It will begin with just simply things like Gaius and Tiberius with changing how they do things, political disobedience, to gang violence in the forum and intimidation in elections, to open civil wars between the great men of state. And we'll see how this plays out through several wars and what goes on, and the chief men of Rome, such as Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and even on into the period of Julius Caesar. So again, this legacy of the Gracchi, in that they ignored and destroyed the mos maior, the way of the ancestors, the traditional way of doing things, and they transformed how office holders saw their role, in that the office of the tribune in the tribal assembly of the plebs could be used to do many and very powerful things. It had the potential to do many things, but that was not the original goal or duty of the office of tribune. It was simply to protect people in the lower orders. But constantly, from this point forward, the office of tribune is going to be used and reused and reused to assert power and go around the Senate and other traditional assemblies. So this will begin a period of violence and political disobedience. And this can really be exemplified. I like to tell this story through the lives of the great leaders of Rome. And there's other ways to do this, but this is just really how I find it the most interesting, and the way to and the best way to approach the ancient world is through the lives of these people, because history ultimately is not simply about political development, but it's about the human beings that made the history, I think. So the first big player within the Roman Revolution is Gaius Marius. And Gaius Marius was not seen to have a lot of potential in political life, but he was a magnificent general, and he distinguishes himself through some wars in North Africa, fighting Jugurtha of Numidia, and who Jugurtha famously said that when he came to Rome to parlay a deal with the Roman Senate, that everything and everyone in Rome was for sale. So this does not augur well for Rome, that he could basically buy off any politician or office that or officer of state that he needed to get whatever he wanted. But eventually, Gaius Marius is going to be elected consul, and he will fight Jugurtha of Numidia, and he becomes, through his military exploits, sort of Rome's first great man. And you will begin to see this sort of these great warlords like Marius coming to dominate Rome in a way that simply the Republican system had not done before. And within Marius's army, the next great generalissimo warlord will be Lucius Cornelius Sulla. And he's a lieutenant of Marius, and he really distinguishes himself within these Jugurthan wars. And Marius, as consul, he takes an army and he marches north. And he is, as I say, a magnificent general, a lousy politician. And Rome at this point is going to send armies beyond the Alps. So remember Gallia Cisalpina down here in the Po Valley. So there is going to be Gaul on this side of the Alps, and then there is going to be Gaul on that side of the Alps. So Transalpine Gaul and Cisalpine Gaul. So Marius is going to take his troops and is going to go beyond the Alps, and he's going to begin these Gallic wars. And he is highly successful after several other consular armies were defeated. So Marius is going to, because of the Gallic wars where there were several Roman armies that were beaten, that he's going to reform the army. And he's going to do several things that had not been done before. He will stand for consul 5 times in a row, for instance. And he is going to, and this is very key, this is a hallmark of Marius's reforms, is that before Marius's reforms, you did not, or you had to own a certain amount of land in order to serve in the army. And also, service in the Roman army was voluntary. This was part of your civic duty, and you had to provide your own armor, your own weapons, everything that you had to have to serve in the army. And Marius is going to transform this. He's going to create an army of non-landowning citizens, and they are going to become a paid force, a professional army, if you will. But the problem with this is that the soldiers, while they got paid, they got their weapons and training provided, they were loyal not to the Roman state, but they were loyal to then Marius himself, who guaranteed their pay, what they were going to get out of this deal, and Marius often promised land for his soldiers. If you serve in the army, not only are you going to get a small amount of pay, it wasn't a salary or anything of this nature, but you would be promised that you could get land once you won a war for Marius. So this is a very key innovation. And Marius is also going to create a different style of legion, which is going to become the cohort legion, which is a bit technical for an introductory course, but he transforms how the army is made up, and it's going to become larger and bigger, and it also will function better for what he is going to do on long campaigns. And here you can see the difference between the MANIPLE legion and the cohort legion, which is basically size and the use of auxiliary forces and cavalry instead of just pure infantry. So after Marius' great victory in the north, he is going to continue in being consul and great man of Rome, even though he's not a very good politician, and he is a bad judge of character. And in order to get the land appropriated for his veterans, remember he promised land to all these people who had served him in the Gallic wars, he is going to attempt to get that through the Senate. He fails because, again, he's a lousy politician. So therefore he's going to take the Tiberius Gracchus route, and he is going to go through the tribal assembly of the plebs, and he's going to use one of his clients, who is APULEIUS Saturninus. And Saturninus is not the most graceful politician either, and he ends up being found out that Saturninus had ordered the assassination of a person who was standing for the office of praetor, and anyway, he is highly disgraced within Rome, and since Saturninus was a tribune, and he was also a client of Gaius Marius, Marius himself is disgraced. Saturninus is pursued by a mob through the forum. He takes refuge within the Senate house, and he's pelted to death by the great clay tiles that the mob hurls down upon him. And along with the death of Saturninus, Marius is, because he is associated with this, is forced to retire. He will make a comeback, but ultimately his land bill and what he was trying to do for his troops ends up failing at this point. And along with the wars in Gaul, we have to turn our eyes east, because remember, Rome is a massive and huge empire at this point. And a problem that is going to arise is in the area of Pontus, which is in eastern Turkey, present-day Turkey, or Anatolia, as the ancient word goes. And this is the kingdom of Pontus here, right on the Black Sea. And their king, Mithridates, does this thing that is called the Asiatic Vespers, where he exterminates overnight within Anatolia, here in present-day Turkey, about 80,000 Roman businessmen, administrators, citizens, etc. And Mithridates is attempting to lead a rebellion against Rome, and Rome simply cannot allow this to happen. And there are a series of wars that happen, but ultimately one of these brilliant young commanders that comes out of the Roman Revolution, who is Pompey, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, is going to crush and defeat Mithridates completely. But there's several things that develop out of the Mithridatic Wars that show the crumbling of the Republic. And I just simply can't look at every aspect of Roman society in this course. This isn't actually a course on Rome proper. So I want to keep focusing on the devolution of the Republic. And one of these as I say, people that really distinguishes himself within the Marian army is Sulla, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. And he is given a consulship, a proconsulship, and he is sent to Pontus to fight in the Mithridatic Wars. And Marius, who is trying to make a comeback, again uses a tribune to veto Sulla's consulship. And remember, Sulla was a lieutenant of Marius, who is a great general, and Sulla is a far more ruthless politician and military man than Marius himself was. And Marius wants the command in the east. He wants to go and fight again, and therefore he gets a tribune to veto Marius's proconsulship. And Sulla was down in the south of Rome. Again, this just shows how inept, politically speaking, Marius was, because Sulla basically has an entire army formed just south of Rome in Campania. And this is right when Marius uses the tribune to get a veto of this campaign and get himself set up as the commander. And Sulla at this point says, I have had enough, and I am going to go to Rome, and I am going to fix things. And I am going to, as he says, free Rome from tyrants. And he marches on the city of Rome, and the senators and leading people, his friends of Rome, come out to meet Sulla, and he doesn't, of course, kill them or treat them badly, but they plea with him, say, please don't do this. What are you doing, Sulla? And he just simply continues to reply, I am going to free Rome from tyrants. That he has had enough, that he is going to use force. He is going to use force to assert what he believes is good, and that he is going to preserve the Roman Republic through the use of military force. And he will eventually march into the Senate House, and with his veterans, soldiers present in the Senate, he is going to ask the Senate whether he could become dictator. Of course, the Senate says, yes, indeed, you are going to get to be dictator. And then Sulla is going to institute his reforms, and as dictator. He's just going to give an order, and it's going to be done, because he is powerful and he can do it. And a few of the reforms of Sulla are that tribunes could no longer propose any legislation. The Senate House could veto basically all legislation through the office of consul. Again, all these things absolutely violating the traditional way of doing things within Roman political theory. and the way of the ancestors, the mos maiorum. This is a breaking of traditions. Remember, I said that one of the hallmarks of this is political disobedience that would then become gang fighting and violence, and then it would become total revolution. And this is really the break. I think you can see just officially that this is where a dictator is using their power to completely transform how the Roman system is done. But this is to, in Sulla's mind, preserve the Republic, not destroy the Republic. He saw the violations of the use of the office of tribune, and he is trying to fix these. And so, if you stood for tribune, you could never again hold any other office. So if you were a tribune, you could never be a praetor, you could never be a consul. Once your tribuneship was over, you were done. Your political career was ended after Sulla institutes his reforms, which they are short-lived, I would note. And he created a number of new offices and attempted to reform the courts. He makes the Senate bigger. And he, through the use of his army in Rome, ensures that and declares that other generals could never bring their army within this sacred precinct of Rome. So it's kind of ironic that Sulla uses his army to institute these kinds of reforms. So Sulla also creates these prescription lists that basically any enemy of Sulla is an enemy of Rome. So his personal enemies and those he deemed to be enemies of the state were put on prescription lists, which were these lists that were circulated around the Roman Empire that ordered anyone to murder these people that were on the lists, that you would get not only rewarded, you would not only be doing a service to the state, but you would be monetarily rewarded for exterminating these people on the prescription lists. And thousands were put on these lists, and thousands died because of this. So again, seeing this from political disobedience to gang violence to nearly open civil war. And once Sulla had instituted his reforms, that he had eliminated his enemies, he had, as he believed, set Rome on a course of reform and fixed things. He resigns his dictatorship, and he basically goes out to his villa in the south of Rome and drinks himself to death within a couple years, enjoying life to the fullest. So this will begin a time of transformation within Rome. That after this point, that generalissimos and military strongmen were going to use their personal power in order to gain advantage, and this can be seen in the next group of great leaders in Rome, and that is Pompey, Marcus Crassus, or Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Marcus Crassus, and one fellow you've probably never heard of, who is Gaius Julius Caesar. Yes, that is the Caesar of legend. So who was Pompey? Well, he was Sulla's lieutenant. He was young and a bold and great general, a decent politician, and he distinguished himself within the Mithridatic Wars. He goes to Spain, where he defeats some enemies of Sulla, and he eventually is going to come into conflict with his fellow there will be this thing called the triumvirate that is formed between these three fellows, Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar, and he will eventually come into conflict with both of these individuals. But for a time, Pompey becomes really the great man of Rome, and he's almost a benevolent leader to some degree, but he really likes being the great man, but he's not as ambitious as Julius Caesar. And he's happy to kind of play within this new system as long as he kind of get what he wants and so on. And Pompey, when he goes out to conquer Mithridates, which he does, and he conquers Pontus, and he goes around the east of the Roman Empire, settling things, sort of behaving like an emperor or a king, and he gets the Senate to grant him this thing, Imperium Infinitum, meaning that he has imperium not just within a certain province or area for a certain amount of time, but his imperium is to the entire eastern half of the Roman Empire. And with this, he has nearly the authority of a dictator. And he uses this imperium infinitum in order to pacify pirates. This is what he argues he needs it for, but he also makes a lot of deals without consulting the Senate. Just he himself, Pompey, really makes whatever deal he wants. And he famously says within Plutarch's life of him that when he returns to Rome and someone argues that he's way overstepped his bounds and behaved illegally, he just basically tells them to shut up, that wherever I stamp my foot in Italy, 100,000 men would rise up to do whatever I say. So this is, he's a very mild-mannered fellow, as you can tell. So the other fellow in the triumvirate of this three-person organization that is formed to basically run the state is Marcus Crassus. He's the richest citizen of Rome. He's famously the fire marshal, and he would show up and he would, if your house was on fire, and he would offer to put it out if you could afford to pay. And if you couldn't afford to pay, or well, then he would make you a deal. He would say, well, would you sell me your property right now? And if you said no, then he'll let your house burn down. And if you say yes, well, then he'll put the fire out, but you then have to pay Crassus rent. So he's a shrewd businessman, shall we say. And he is going to get involved in the Servile Wars, which is led famously by Spartacus, the gladiator. And he's a very good businessman, a decent politician, but a very inept general, as we will come to see. He and Pompey share consulships from time to time, and they use Julius Caesar for a time in order to help them with their political objectives, but they had no idea that Caesar, who was very young and he was poor, but he had a great aristocratic name, that Caesar would eventually become the greatest of them all. And Crassus and Pompey get into a argument over who is going to lead this war against the slaves who rise up against their Roman masters, led by Spartacus and his motley group of gladiators. And eventually they are going to meet their end after several exciting political events we don't have time to go into, but eventually Crassus is going to defeat this servile army, largely because of Spartacus trusted that some pirates were going to help him. Surprise, surprise, he was betrayed by pirates, and this slave army was defeated. And Crassus, very merciful man, I'm highly sarcastic here, he crucifies 6,000 of these slaves along one of the main roads, the Appian Way, after the end of the Servile War. But you can see here Crassus using his power, and then there's another insurrection within Rome. This is the famous Catalonian insurrection led by, when Marcus Tullius Cicero, the famous orator, is consul, and he leads an army against Catiline, who is using the mob. Catiline he's a nobleman, and he attempts to be consul, and he's mad because he didn't get to be consul, and so he incites the mob and forms an army himself in order to assert his power. Cicero leads his armies, the Roman armies, the official Roman armies, against Catiline, and he defeats them, but he puts people to death without trial, etc. And I think that what this incident really shows, and there's a lot of fun things that go on with this, and exciting things within Roman political theory. We don't have time to get into them, but nevertheless, what this shows is that at this point in the Roman state, at 63 BC, that Rome is not paying attention to its empire. It is not paying attention to constitutional issues, and private people, individuals, are willing to use mob violence or civil war to get what they want personally. This is not the great virtuous Republicans of old, but this is a group of new men who are using mob violence and civil war in order to aggrandize themselves personally. So enter Gaius Julius Caesar, who is, he was a client of Crassus, and he's eventually made the high priest of Rome in 63. He gets a praetorship, and this is when Julius Caesar really begins to distinguish himself as a supreme military mind, on the level of Alexander the Great, or a Hannibal that had gone before him, or a Scipio Africanus. And they, Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar have an unofficial political arrangement, as I hinted at earlier, which is called the First Triumvirate, or the Rule of Three, in that they are just simply so powerful altogether that they are going to be able to basically run Rome as a kind of their own private institution, because they are so rich, they are so powerful, and they are so influential. And Caesar is going to stand for consul in 59, and he's going to push through a land bill for Pompey's veterans. He's going to arrest some political enemies, chiefly Cato the Younger, who's this famous orator that speaks out against these reforms of Caesar and Pompey and the actions of Crassus. And he is going to basically, as consul, behave like a tribune and as if he were the only consul in the state. Remember, collegiality. There would always be two consuls. There would always be more than one chief officer. But Caesar is really behaving as though he is the only consul, and that he can just ram things through. He can behave like a tribune, that he can propose anything, he can veto anything, that it is a total, complete ignoring of traditional ways of doing things. And eventually, at the end of his one-year consulship, he is going to push through his own proconsulship of Gaul for a time of 10 years. And he's going to successfully defeat the Gauls. He is going to conquer all of present-day France, which the Romans referred to as Gaul. Remember the poor Celts we talked about ages ago? Well, they are going to be conquered completely by Julius Caesar, and he's going to write some famous books about this, De Gallico Bello, which are the on the Gallic Wars, where Caesar famously writes in the third person, saying he, Caesar, did this, as he himself, Caesar, is writing the book. And he's going to finally defeat, and probably his most famous battle is at ALESIA, where he defeats, there's a great name, Vercingetorix, the high chieftain of the Gauls, and Caesar is going to defeat a massive force of the Gauls, where he was outnumbered over 3-1, and he's going to pull a miracle at ALESIA. He's going to defeat the Gauls through his great strategy and tactics, and this is why Romans always wear red, is because of Caesar. At this point, he would, at just the right time in battles, like Alexander the Great before him, he would put on a red cape, and he would himself lead his troops at the most critical times and junctures. Again, it is different when a general stands behind you and says, now march forward. It's another thing when he draws his sword, walks out in front of you, and says, now follow me. Caesar is a master of tactics in this sense, and he is able in this way to really inspire his men. And this shows the behavior of how the triumvirate works. Is they have a conference at Lucca, the Italian city, and they just simply decide. They don't consult the Senate. They don't consult anyone else. They just all three show up, and they say Caesar's going to get a 5-year extension of his proconsulship in Gaul. Pompey is going to get a command in Spain, and Crassus is going to get a proconsulship in Syria, because he wants some military glory. It's the only thing really remaining in his life. The only thing he had done is conquered a bunch of slaves, and that Pompey and Crassus will become official consuls of Rome. And they just decide this. This is how things are being done, that the great men of Rome are just deciding what is going to be, and they assert their will through their great power and influence, clientship, bribery, whatever it might be done. That the old ways of doing things, the virtues of the Republic, are lost within this period. And Livy really points this out to us. And why is it so important that they hold political offices? Pompey himself is really never going to go to Spain. He's not going to do anything, but within Roman tradition, as long as you hold an office, you can never be prosecuted for anything. So this is why it is so important that each of these guys always have a political office, because they then can never suffer prosecution. And this is what is eventually going to drive Caesar to march on Rome, is that he will be prosecuted for illegal warfare and overstepping his bounds, misusing his office, these kinds of things. So what happens to Crassus? So he's going to indeed go to Syria. He's going to take an army. He's going to march out into old Assyria, what is called Parthia, and he's going to take a fight, or he's going to pick a fight with the Parthians there to expand Rome's empire. And sadly for Crassus, the Parthians are magnificent horse archers. He was not a great general, a very poor general, and he's going to go out on the open plains of Mesopotamia and attempt to fight these guys, and he is going to have his army exterminated at the Battle of Carrhae, that they are just simply annihilated, and Crassus himself is killed. So passes Marcus Crassus, the richest man of Rome. So this destroys the triumvirate, and without the money and influence of Crassus, Pompey and Caesar can't hold things together in the way that they had before. And Pompey is can be used by the Senate, and the Senate uses Pompey, but the Senate, they immediately turn on Julius Caesar. For a time, Pompey attempts to protect him, and the Senate confers the rank of consul upon Pompey and uses him to maintain order, and there's an uprising within Rome with a couple fellows, and Pompey is going to restore order. And at this point, Pompey had married a relative, or Julius Caesar's daughter. And Pompey's 35 years older than her, but nevertheless, he married her. She dies in childbirth, and at this point, one of Pompey is going to marry the daughter of one of the rivals of Caesar, Lucius Cornelius Scipio. And so this is going to create a rift between Pompey and Caesar, and at this point they will become nearly political enemies. And the Senate uses this opportunity to encourage Pompey to move against Caesar as consul, and to prosecute Caesar for illegal warfare and the violation of his commands, abuses of power, this kind of thing. That the Senate, led by the optimates, the aristocrats, are moving against the populares, which is led by Julius Caesar. This is the party of the people. And Cato the Younger, remember Caesar arrests him, but he is always working against Julius Caesar and his faction. And Caesar refuses to acquiesce the desires of the Senate and Pompey, and Caesar says, I will only return when my demands are met, that I want my legitimate rights pursued. I have done nothing illegal. And so he will not lay down, he will not resign his command until he gets what he wants, basically. That he can safely return to Rome, and his property will not be seized, that he will not be attacked by the other side's troops, etc., etc. He fears assassination, and the Senate and the optimates, led by Pompey, refuse to do this thing. So Julius Caesar, with 1 legion of his veterans from Gaul, marches across the Alps, and he famously crosses the Rubicon River in 49 BC, and he says, the die is cast. meaning that what he has done has set things in motion that can never be undone, that this will be a model that everyone follows after him. And Caesar marches on Rome with just exceptional speed. He is a great general. His legions are hardy, seasoned veterans. The Senate again turns to Pompey to save them, and Pompey had been sort of living the good life for 10 years. He hasn't fought in any real war for a decade. He's an old man at this point, and he attempts to rally some legions, and he says famously, "We will have to make a tactical withdrawal to the south." So he yields Rome with ever unsheathing his sword. Julius Caesar marches into Rome unopposed, declares himself dictator, and this really begins the period of the Roman civil wars. And Caesar's veterans are outnumbered 2-1 by Pompey's soldiers. And at the Battle of Pharsalus, Pompey is soundly defeated by Caesar's much more smaller but veteran force of crack troops. And Pompey himself escapes the battle, flees to Egypt with the remainder of the Optimate party of the Senate, and famously Ptolemy VIII, king of Egypt, murders Pompey and brings his head to Julius Caesar on a silver platter when Caesar, turns up to Egypt. And Caesar uses this as an excuse that Pompey was a consul of Rome, though he was an enemy of Julius Caesar, that he would take this opportunity then to conquer Egypt and annex it as a province within the Roman Empire, which he does with, again, a small force, a miraculous victory. He marries Cleopatra. He has his only natural-born son, Caesarion, at this time he brings Egypt within the patrimony of Rome. Caesar is just a magnificent general to be able to accomplish the things that he does, and he is also very lucky. And then he sends his troops, and they pursue the rest of the Optimate party of the Senate, led by Cato, into North Africa, where they attempted to kind of set up a new Senate in Carthage, and also then later in Spain. Cato famously commits suicide because he would rather be dead than see the Republic fall under the dictatorship of Rome. And the last of the Pompeian supporters are defeated in Spain the year after Cato commits suicide. So when Julius Caesar is triumphant, he names himself dictator, or the Senate names Caesar dictator for 10 years, and shortly after that he's going to be named dictator for life. There's this interesting and famous incident where Mark Antony, Caesar's second in command, his master of horse, offers him a crown. But remember, even as a dictator, Caesar is not king. He is king in all but name, but he can never take on that name. Now, is this a political attempt to make Caesar a king, to test the waters? It's unclear. But Caesar sees the reaction of the crowd as Antony offers him a crown, and Caesar refuses the crown, saying Rome has no king, that Rome is a republic. So again, there's still this allusion to this sort of Roman Republic, but the Roman Republic is dead in all but name, and Caesar is king in all but name. He's dictator for life, and Caesar sets about, as dictator for life, reorganizing the state. And he's happy to have this sort of personal power, and he does attempt to sort of make reforms to the Republic, and he does many interesting and good things. Some very valuable things. He creates a new calendar. He settles all the land issues for his veterans and some of the poorer people within the Popolare party. He makes new colonies. He creates new massive building projects, and he even builds a new Senate house. But ultimately, there is still a party within Rome, famously led by Brutus and Cassius, who wanted to restore the old republic. They saw themselves as liberators, so in the Ides of March, Julius Caesar is famously stabbed to death on the floor of the Senate House in 44 BC, in March of 44 BC. And the Senate named Julius Caesar a god after his death, and he becomes a semi-divine figure. Following in the wake of this, what happened to the conspirators? Well, they are chased out of Rome by Mark Antony, Caesar's second in command, and they are pursued and hunted, and then another set of strongmen politicians led by Mark Antony, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian Caesar, who will become Augustus, the great emperor of Rome, and as well as Marcus Lepidus, who's this other sort of figure that is not ultimately that important, but he's a great commander under Mark Antony. So Lepidus, Antony, and Octavian will form sort of this second triumvirate. But this really distinguishes the end of the Republican period to in all but name. There's going to be some attempts by Augustus and even Caesar himself to still say the Republic existed. But after Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon, and really even before this with Pompey and Sulla, that the Republican period has really come to an end, and Rome, the Empire of Rome, is going. I think this is where you can really say the Roman Empire, that it's no longer a republic, is after Julius Caesar. That simply generalissimos and warlords, great and powerful military men, are going to put their own interests and agenda ahead of the Roman Republic. That this is the fall of the end of the virtuous republicans, and this is what Livy is going to allude to time and time again, that this period of warfare and civil wars brought about an end because of the exploitation of political offices. So I hope within this lecture that you have come to see kind of the rise of the military strongmen and sort of this end of the Roman Republic, and have an appreciation for what the old Republican system was, and how these new political developments brought about the end of a period, political period within Rome. So until next time, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise.